Good morning. My name is Brent, and I love to garden. This time of year, it's just early March, and I start getting cabin fever, and so I want to start doing my gardening a little earlier and in the house. I try to, each year as I garden, I try to do something a little different. And I was thinking about this year, and I thought, well, why not make a little video about my gardening, and I could share some of my thoughts and things that I have tried over the years, successes and things that have maybe not been as successful, and share them with other people. So that's the purpose of this video today. As you look around my surroundings here, you probably say, well, that doesn't look like a place to garden. But this is an unfinished room under my house. I call it my dungeon. Some people might call it your man cave or whatever. But this is my dungeon, and this is where a lot of my gardening starts. This is where I keep my gardening books, and this is where I will go through and select the seeds that I want for each year. But more importantly, this is where I start most of my plants that I put out in the garden later on. As you can see behind me here, I have a set of lights that I have built. And this is a very easy, simple, inexpensive way of starting your plants. I just use basic shop lights from one of the box stores. I have tried the more expensive grow lights, and they work great, but they are expensive. And I have found that just the regular fluorescent shop light will start my plants just as well as a more expensive grow light would do. And so this is where I start a lot of my plants each year. Now, what I will do down here when I start them is I usually plant things what I call in mass. Like this is some basil that I have planted in mass. And so I will just take a pot or some kind of a container and scatter a bunch of seeds in there. And then after they have sprouted and developed 2 or 3 or 4 sets of leaves, depending on the plant, then I will take and move them from the in mass planting, and I will put them in to the regular 6-packs that you're familiar with seeing. These are some petunias that was started in January, and a couple weeks ago I moved them out of their mass planting and moved them into the 6-packs. Soon I will take them down to the greenhouse where they can continue to grow until it's time to put them out. This is some tomatoes. I planted these also at the end of January. These are a sun sugar tomato, and I normally wouldn't plant tomatoes this early in the season, but I like to try to get some early tomatoes. So these sun sugar tomatoes will get moved up in another week or so to a gallon container, and then later on I'll move them into an even larger container. And I will probably be eating these tomatoes by Memorial Day. They're just a small cherry-sized tomato, and so I just like to do things like that to extend my season a little and make it a little bit more fun. This is some onions that I have started over here under the lights. With onions, what I like to do is I just use a 4-inch container, and I'll put about 50 onion seeds in there and then put it over under the lights and let them sprout. This way, by the time the snow is melted outside and it's time to put them out, these will be nice husky plants and be just perfect for setting out. I have found in my area at least that I get a lot better onion when I start my own onion versus buying them in a nursery or a farm store. And also by starting my own, I can choose, I have a little more choice over the variety that I grow. So I grow most things under my grow lights. What you're seeing over here right now, this is geraniums. These were started the 20th of January, and this is how big they are now, and they're ready to go down to the greenhouse also. But they were started in mass, And then when they got, like I say, 2 or 3 or 4 sets of leaves on them, I moved them over to the 4-inch containers. And these 4-inch containers will be big enough to keep these until it's time to put them out the end of May or the 1st of June. Now, each of you are going to have a different variety of circumstances for your growing. You may not have an opportunity to have grow lights like this, and so you could just use the windowsill in your house and put them in the windowsill. Now, I'm blessed to have a greenhouse, and in a little bit I'll take you down there and show you the greenhouse, but I didn't always have a greenhouse, so there are things that you can do. You can set them in front of a patio window. I even made small greenhouses, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, that you can do. So there are different things that each of you can do to get plants started earlier in the season. I love this time of year because I'm getting excited about gardening, but I really can't do anything about it. And so I enjoy starting my own plants, and that's one of the tips that I would like to pass on to you as fellow gardeners, is that if you don't start your own plants, consider doing that. It's a great way to get rid of cabin fever, and it's also a great way to get better plants and also the kind of plants that you want to grow in your garden.
This is our farm, Valley View Acres. It's located in beautiful Cache Valley. We are about 2 miles west of the city of Logan. We do a lot of the starting of our items for our gardens at our home in Logan, and then we'll move it down here to the greenhouse. This closest greenhouse that you're seeing that has the black cover, we call our shade house. This is where we will put plants that might not need as much heat and sun, and we'll leave them there during the hot time of the summer so they can get a better start. The greenhouse in the background is where we grow a lot of our plants. As you see, our farm is located surrounded by mountains here in beautiful Cache Valley. As the season goes on, we will probably be showing more of our farm and of the things that are growing here. I wanted to just take this picture though to show you what it looks like. Today is March the 6th. We usually do not have this kind of snow in March, but this year has been an unusual year and we have a lot of snow. We're probably going to have a lot of flooding when the snow melts.
This is inside our greenhouse. We've got it all ready to move the plants that we showed you before up under the lights at the house. We're ready to move them down here and let them start growing. Here in the greenhouse right now it's 104 degrees. It's 25 degrees outside, and that's just the sun coming in and warming the greenhouse up that much. So if you're able to have a greenhouse, it's amazing how much the sun power will do. During the winter, when it's below zero outside, if the sun shines, it'll still warm up to 60 here in the greenhouse during the day. So it's a lot of fun having a greenhouse. I will mention though that we can't always have greenhouses. I didn't always have a greenhouse. When I was younger, as I mentioned, I used to just put my starts in the windows. When I finally decided I wanted to do something more than that, I built my first small greenhouse. It was just a lean-to, and I just made a little frame out of 2x4s and leaned it against the side of the house, and then had a little door in the one end of it, and that worked for a few years for me to use as a small greenhouse. When I decided that that was not adequate any longer, I built my first real greenhouse. This came about because a neighbor was doing some remodeling, and they had 4 large glass windows that they were going to get rid of, and so they gave those to me, and I used those to build my first greenhouse. I built it, it was 6 feet by 12 feet, and it was all glass on the south side that faced the sun. This gave me enough room that I had a full bench across the side where the windows was at, and then on the back where the sun could shine in, I put shelves in there where I could do it. And that little greenhouse worked for me for several years. I had a little space heater in there with a thermostat on it so I could control the heat. And then there was a door that had a window, and then on the opposite side a sliding window, so I could open that door and that window and get ventilation in there during the day when it was too warm. Here in this greenhouse, I bought this house a few years ago. It was a used house in another part of town, and I bought it and tore it apart and moved it over here and put it back together. This greenhouse is 18 feet wide and 90 feet long. I used to use the whole greenhouse and even needed more room than that, but now I'm only using the south 20 feet so I can save on my heating bill. So this greenhouse has got a divider right here, and I just have plastic across that so that the rest of the greenhouse doesn't get heated, and I just heat this part of the greenhouse. I have 3 greenhouse benches in here, and by the end of the season I'll probably have those 3 benches full, and I will probably show you that again as we progress through the season and start filling it up. I did want to mention to you also, though, that when I start my plants, I use this SunGrow propagation mix. You don't have to use SunPro, just find a propagation mix because it's a finer mix and it's better for getting the seeds started. And then after they've got started and I move them up, then I use this other product, and this bag is upside down, but this is also a SunGrow product, but it's just a growing mix. And so you can go to your own store and get a propagation mix and a growing mix. It doesn't have to be SunGrow. These are just the ones that I use. I do recommend using a good potting soil, though, because if you just go get soil out of your garden, it's usually, at least in our part of the country, it's too heavy and does not work very well for starting the plants. And so it's worth the investment to get some growing mix for your plants to grow in. I might also mention that in this large greenhouse, I have a thermostat controlled heater over here, and so I just set my heater at about 40 to 45 degrees, and then that way it keeps things from freezing, but it also doesn't cost as much to heat it. I mentioned when we started that it's 104 in here. It's pretty warm today. If I had my plants in here, I've got windows on this side of the greenhouse and fans on this side of the greenhouse. So when it gets this warm, I would open the windows and turn on the fans and get some ventilation in here so that it wouldn't cook the plants. My plants go through a large range of temperature, though, because at night, this time of year, they will get down to 40 degrees in here, and in the day, up to 100 degrees. And so they go through quite a range of temperature, and I don't believe that hurts my plants because they grow to be sturdy and strong, and they're ready to go out into the garden when the time is right, and I don't have to harden them off like you would do in a greenhouse that is kept at a constant temperature. This is my backyard. This is where a lot of my gardening takes place. I start things in the house, and then when they get big enough, I'll move them out here to the garden. In my yard, the garden is from the barn back to the trees, and that's where I do most of my gardening. And as the season progresses, we'll see more of that. As you can see, there is a lot of snow still here. Today is March the 6th, and we usually do not have this kind of snow in Logan, Utah this late in the season, but this has been a very unusual year. I usually get started planting around the middle of March.
I like to put my peas in between the 15th of March and the 15th of April. I don't think that'll be happening this year, but I did want to take a moment and show you what the yard looks like and what it looks like on March 6th of 2023. Hopefully the snow will melt soon and we can get on with our gardening.
Good morning. It's March 22nd, and it's been a couple of weeks, a little over, since I made the last segment, and I thought I would get back to you and let you know what's going on with my gardening. As you can maybe see out the window, it's still snowing here in Logan, Utah, and usually by this time of March, I'm out working in the garden. But this year, we have had an extremely heavy winter with a lot of snow, and it just doesn't want to let up. But even though winter is still going on outside, I've been busy inside getting ready for the gardening. A little bit ago, I showed you my dungeon where I start my plants. Down in the dungeon, I've got a lot of things going right now. I just planted my tomatoes. I mentioned how I plant in mass. This flat right here has 11 different kinds of tomato plants in it. And when these grow, there will probably be 200 or 300 plants in this flat. And they will be in mass, and I will then take them out and put them into the little 6-packs so that they can continue to grow. The tomatoes are ready to go down in the dungeon under the lights right now. I just went down and took my peppers out. These have been down in the dungeon under the lights. There's 8 different kinds of peppers in this flat, and these are ready to be potted up. I thought I'd kind of show you how I do that. I put them into the 6-packs, but you've seen the 6-packs in the stores, and you don't necessarily have to do all of this yourself. I think the nursery business is a great business, and I support them and buy some of my things in the stores also. So if you don't want to do all of what I do at home, you can still go over to your local nursery and buy your plants. But some of the plants are small when I pack them up into the 6-packs. And so I'll just take a 6-pack and fill it up with soil and poke a little hole in it and then stick the plant in that hole. These peppers that I'm doing today, though, they're a little bit bigger and have a little bit more of a root on them. And so what I'll do is I'll leave the 6-pack empty, and I'll put the plant with the roots down in there, and then I'll just put soil around that. I don't pack it tight. I just snug it in there a little bit to hold it. And then I'll end up doing this with the 6-packs. It's important that after you get these potted up that you water them good. And so these, as soon as I get these all potted up, they are ready to go down to the greenhouse and sit until it's time to put them outside. When I have these in the greenhouse, I only fertilize them about every 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not a big fertilizer person, but little starts like this that are just getting started, I'll use a balanced fertilizer like a 16-16-16 or a 20-20-20 in a liquid fertilizer, and then every 2 to 3 weeks I'll just water them with that fertilizer, and that just greens them up and makes them grow really nice, and then they're ready when their season comes to put them out. So I just wanted to make that little segment today so that we could see what is going on. Even though outside winter is still going on, we can be getting ready for it. So I'll talk to you next time we do a segment.
Good morning. Today is April the 4th, and we should be out gardening. But as you can see, that isn't going to happen today. Winter has still got its grip on us here in northern Utah. I usually like to have my peas planted by now, but this year we are still getting snow. Yesterday we had about 5 inches of snow, today about 7, and we're forecast for another 7 tonight. But even though winter is still here, there are things going on for the garden. The dungeon is full of plants and the greenhouse is full of plants. So as soon as it stops snowing and the snow melts so we can get into the garden, we will be back to gardening, and we'll have a lot to do when that day comes. Today is April 5th. This is what the farm looks like. There's geese out here swimming in the lakes. Today is April the 19th, and our snow has finally left the ground. It seems like this winter has been the winter that would never end. It's still way too muddy to work the soil, but I did want to take a few minutes and introduce you to my garden, as we will be getting started gardening very soon now. My garden is about 66 feet wide and about 100 feet deep. I have around the edges of my garden apple trees and raspberry plants, and on the other side over here I've got grapevines, and then I have a little barn here that takes up part of that 66 by 100. The rest is where most of my gardening takes place. This is my garden spot. It looks a little bit junky right now because all during the winter I throw my scraps like potato peelings and carrot peelings and eggshells and any fruit that might go bad, fruit or vegetables that goes bad, I throw them out onto the garden. And then when it dries out, I will till them in and they all become organic matter. Also in my garden, in the fall, I put several inches of leaves on the garden and till them in. If you do this, it's very important to make sure you get them tilled in the fall. If you don't, you'll have a mat of dry leaves on top of the soil, and the soil will not be able to dry out, and it makes it more difficult and a longer time that you have to wait before you can do your tilling. Also in the fall, I take my carrots and I cover them with leaves. You can see what's left of this batch of carrots. We'll go over and look at those in a minute. But I cover those all with leaves and just leave them in the ground for the winter. And then when I want carrots, I just go out and dig the carrots. They're nice and fresh that way, and it seems like through the winter they even sweeten up and taste delicious. Okay, this is what's left of my carrots from last year. We're going to go ahead and dig some of these and see what we've got so I can show you. I mentioned I cover them with a thick layer of leaves, and that insulates them during the winter so they don't freeze. You can see there's a nice worm too, but you can see the carrots in here. They are nice and fresh and crisp. These carrots will stay good until we dig them here in the spring. It's getting the time of the year now though where I need to get them dug, so as soon as it dries out I can till the rest of the garden. These are going to be delicious to eat. I love doing my carrots this way, and I would recommend it to each of you. Now, as this video has gone on a little longer than I expected it to, we're going to break it into two parts. This is where we'll make the break. So I hope that you've enjoyed watching the preparation for my garden. And when we come back the next time in part 2, we'll be planting and harvesting. So we will see you in the next episode. Bye.